The 49ers have just traded Deebo Samuel to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick. Now, color me surprised because I did not expect the 49ers to trade Deebo at all. I thought he was going to be a post-June 1st release candidate because that would give them the most flexibility when it comes to cap savings. But then the more we dig into it, it's not necessarily about the cap savings. Yes, you're going to save cap next year and the years to follow. It's more cash flow savings that they were after, which is why the trade made sense to them. Now, if it wasn't a cash flow issue, a trade wouldn't have made sense to the 49ers unless it was a 2nd or 3rd round pick, because in that case, you're eating up $17 million in cash that you're paying out to Deebo Samuel while getting a 2nd or 3rd round pick. So you're essentially buying a draft pick. But this has me thinking that this is has to do with the Yorks cash flow for the 49ers organization. As you know, the Yorks own the team. They've owned the team since the DeBartolos, then they went to the Yorks, and now Jed York is now the operating CEO, although Denise and John York are still in charge of the organization and have the full ownership rights. Jed York is the acting CEO and owns the team as well. But you started seeing different stories throughout the offseason, specifically this past month, where the 49ers are now open to selling 10% of the organization while hoping that the market value is north of $9.2 billion, which means if they sell 10%, they can at least have this sale be for 10% at least $900 million up to $1 billion, which would help with their cash flow issue. Not to mention, they're also hosting the Super Bowl this next year, which tells you a couple things. The fact that they're hosting the Super Bowl means that they have to put out a lot of money. In fact, they already announced they're putting out $200 million to upgrade their LED screen, which means there's a lot of cash flow that's going out. In fact, this past offseason, they paid north of $60 million to Trent Williams, to Christian McCaffrey, but also to Deebo to push out money. But then you include Brandon Ayuk as well. And so there was a lot of immediate cash that went out to players, and they didn't even make the playoffs. So at the end of the day, I'm concerned because how do you attract free agents if you can't pay them upfront money? Unless maybe they're just being a little bit tighter with what they have. Now, the Yorks are known for being billionaires, but again, a lot of money has been spent on this organization with no Super Bowl. And the fact that they're willing to sell 10% of the ownership stake means that they might be a little strapped for cash or strapped for what they're willing to pay without having a Super Bowl to show for it. Because when you win Super Bowls, more money comes in. You could charge more for the seats. In fact, you get more primetime games. So much more gets included. And so there's a concern when it comes to that. Now let's talk about Deebo. Deebo Samuel will go down as one of many fans' favorite wide receivers to play this game. Even though his best year was in 2021, how he played the game really changed for the 49ers on what they look for in a wide receiver. If you go back to Anquan Boldin, when he played for the 49ers, was everybody's favorite type of wide receiver. He was nasty, wouldn't be bullied. In fact, he was probably the number one true, outside of Jerry Rice, or excluding him, but when it comes to yak and kind of that really enforcer-style player from wide receiver standpoint, he was that guy. But he didn't have a lot of speed. Deebo Samuel, when he entered the league, had speed, he had the size, and he, broke a lot of tackles. In fact, he is who you came up with the name for wideback. He was a wide receiver and a running back. The problem with that is because he played both roles, his body wore down much faster than any wide receiver. It wore down like a running back because they gave him the ball at the backfield. He would run up the gut, so right through the trenches. He'd get a lot of bubble screens. And so a lot of things that where he'd get a lot of immediate contact. And so I think that ultimately, that with the last 2 years of him not really producing, really affected if the 49ers were willing to pay an additional $17.55 million this year on his contract. Now, we know that the Commanders had Adam Peters. Adam Peters was close with Deebo Samuel, which makes sense why he ended up with the Commanders. there was a lot of familiarity there. And honestly, with Dan Quinn there's probably this idea of the Commanders made it to the playoffs. They are a few players away from a Super Bowl. And I think that was probably the pitch is if you have a Deebo Samuel, you don't have any other wide receiver like that, you put him opposite Terry McLaurin, he'll be just as effective as he was in 2021 because Terry McLaurin is very much like Brandon Ayuk, and the two should complement each other. And that will only help with Jaden Daniels' kind of maturation as a quarterback. And so I think that's what the selling point was. And they already said they were going to honor his trade or honor letting him go to a new team, get greener pastures, whatever that looks like. But it came down ultimately to not the 49ers and salary cap, the 49ers and cash flow. And so I hope the 49ers are aggressive this offseason, but so far it doesn't appear to be that way. As you put the puzzle pieces together, with the 49ers spending a lot of money this past offseason, with John Lynch saying that they have to be more restrained, with the 49ers organization being willing to sell 10% of the stake, with the 49ers spending $200 million to upgrade their screens for a Super Bowl, that because they'll be hosting it at Levi's, there's just a lot of potential red flags. And now the 49ers willing to get rid of Deebo so they don't have to pay him part of his salary throughout this year, but are willing to incur the salary cap charge because of cash flow. And so hopefully they can get that thing figured out. Maybe it is the sell of the organization. That way in time for free agency, they can figure that out. But time will tell. And hopefully the 49ers will be aggressive. And hopefully they can keep the rest of the core together. Well, that's all we have for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.